Joyeux Noel, Frohe Weihnachten, Feliz Navidad, Buon Natale, Merry Christmas. Did you know that before Santa Claus, who's only about 200 years old, did you know that before him was me, Father Christmas? And today I've come to share some stories with you from all around the world, because Father Christmas was known all around the world. He was known by many names in many different lands. In Germany, he was the Weihnachtsmann. In Italy, I was known as Babbo Natale. So I had many different names all around the land. And the first story I want to share with you today comes from France, where I was known as Père Noël. And this story is called The Puppy Who Wanted a Boy. A long time ago, Petey was a brand new little puppy. And his mama said, it was getting close to Christmas time. And Mama said, Petey, what do you want for Christmas? He said, Mama, all I want is a boy for Christmas. Okay, Petey, you've been pretty good, haven't you, this year? And you haven't chewed on any slippers? Well, maybe just a little. And you haven't chased the cat? Well, sometimes I do, just a little. Well, I think you've been good enough, Petey. I'm going to go out tomorrow and I will see if I can find you a boy for Christmas. And the next morning, Petey was so happy that his mom was going to go out and look for him a boy for Christmas that he waited all day long. And late in the evening, Mama come home and she said, Petey, how about a nice bunny rabbit, a stuffed bunny that you could chew on its ears? No, Mama, all I want is a puppy for Christmas. Well, how about a fish? You could watch it swim in the tank. No, Mama, all I want is a boy for Christmas. Well, Petey, I tried. I looked all day long. I couldn't find any boys who didn't have a puppy. Maybe tomorrow you could go out and look. And so Petey got up on Christmas Eve and he ate his breakfast and he went out into the big city and he looked. And it wasn't long before he came across an English bulldog running along beside a boy riding his bicycle. Maybe this dog would like to give up his boy, he thought. So he yelled and he said, oh, Mr. Bulldog, Mr. Bulldog, would you like to give up your boy? I certainly would not. Be gone. I'm sorry, I probably wouldn't like running along beside a bicycle anyway. He walked on farther. It wasn't long before he came across a French poodle. And he said, Mr. Poodle, I see you're playing catch with your boy. Would you give up your boy? I certainly would not. Be gone. And Petey thought maybe it wouldn't be that much fun to play catch with a ball anyway. He went on, and it was lunchtime. He got hungry. But then he saw a German Shepherd. And the German Shepherd was carrying a little package in its mouth. And he yelled and he said, Mr. Shepherd, would you like to give up your boy that's walking along beside you? Definitely not. Be gone. And Petey thought, well, the package would probably be too heavy to carry anyway. And so Petey went on. He looked down the streets. He looked in the alleys. He looked around buildings. He couldn't find a boy any place that didn't already have a dog. He went until his feet got so tired he couldn't go anymore. And he laid down on the sidewalk to rest for a little bit. And then he saw down at the end of the road was a boy sitting on steps on the front porch. Petey jumped up. He forgot how bad his legs and feet hurt, and he ran as fast as he could. And he ran and he ran and he ran, and he took a big jump and landed right in that boy's lap. The little boy looked down at him and said, "Where did you come from?" And Petey reached up and licked him right on the face. Petey heard noises from inside the house. It was singing. They were singing Christmas carols. And pretty soon a woman came to the door and she said, "Jimmy, it's time to go inside. It's time for supper." And Jimmy said, "Look what I've got." And the woman said, "Well, where did you come from, little puppy?" And he said, "Can I bring him inside?" "Sure, you can bring him in." And when he went inside, Petey was surprised because there wasn't one boy in that house. There were 50 boys. It was a boys' orphanage. And the boy said, "Can we please keep the puppy?" And the woman said, "Yes, you may keep the puppy." And all of the boys wanted to hold Petey. All of them wanted to be licked in the face. And they played with Petey, and Petey was so happy because on this Christmas, he didn't get one boy for Christmas. He got 50 boys for Christmas. And that is the story of the puppy who wanted a boy. Our next story comes from Italy. And this story is about, this story is about a whole family. And this story actually is about a family that had lived a long time ago. And there was an old woman. And her family had all grown up and left. And her name was La Befana. And La Befana, every day she would go and she would sweep the floors. And then she would dust the cabinets. And she would wash the dishes and stack them away. But La Befana, she always baked. She would bake cookies and pies, and she lived up on top of this hill, and down in the valley the people could smell those smells of her cookies and her pies. And they would come, and La Befana, she would always give the children cookies or maybe a piece of pie. La Befana, she was sweeping her door. It was early in the morning when she noticed 3 men riding on camels came up to the door, and they said, "Old woman, we're tired. We've rode all night long. We're looking for a place to sleep today. Could we stay at your house?" La Befana said, "Sure, come on in." Said, "Would you like some cookies and milk?" I said, "Oh, we'd love that." And after they finished eating their cookies and milk, La Befana said, "I only have one bed, but it's big enough for all 3 of you." And so the 3 men, all dressed in fine royal robes, they all went in and they slept in La Befana's bed. And that night, when they woke up, La Befana, she was sweeping her floor. She was dusting the shelves. She was washing her dishes and putting them away. La Befana, we're going to look for a very special child. And we've been following this big star in the sky. Won't you come with us and help us find this very special child? La Befana said, "Oh no, I couldn't do that. It's late and I've got to sweep the floor. I've got to dust the cabinets. I've got to wash the dishes and put them away." And the 3 men climbed back on their camels and they started going farther and farther away. La Befana, she swept her floor. It was getting late. The stars were already out. She was dusting her shelves. She was washing her dishes. And while she was washing her dishes, she got to thinking that maybe she should have went with those men. What do men know about bringing presents to a baby? And so she went over to her chest a big wooden chest. Her children had been gone for many years, but she had saved all her toys. And she took some of the cookies she had baked that day, and she wrapped them in a big blanket, and she put in the toys and put in some cookies. And then she took her broom and she started walking. And she walked and she walked and she walked. And every house that she came to, she would look in the window and she would wonder, is this the special child? She wasn't sure. So she decided she would leave in their shoes beside their bed, she would leave a toy and a cookie. In the next house she came to, she didn't know if it was a special child, and she would leave a toy and a cookie. Now, they say she never did find the special child. But they say if you go to Italy to this day, and on Epiphany Eve, if you put your shoes under your bed, when you get up in the morning, La Befana will have visited you, and she will have left you a cookie and a toy in your shoe. And that is the story from Italy called La Befana. The next story I want to share with you comes from Germany. And this story is called The Little Blue Dishes. There were 3 children that lived with their mother and father outside of a village in Germany a long time ago. The oldest boy was named Peter. He had a brother named Hans and a little sister named Gretchen. And it was Christmas Eve. And the children got up, and after they had done their chores, they decided they would go into the village to find the toy store to see what they might be able to get for Christmas, hoping Father Christmas would know what they wanted and bring it to them. When they went into town, Peter said, "Oh, I'd love to have a new football. The round ones that you kick, that's what I'd really like." And Hans said, "Oh, there's a new train set I would really like. It's all made out of wood." And Gretchen said, "I want that little blue dishes, that set that sits up on the toy maker's shelf." And they all went back home, and they had their supper. And when they'd finished their supper, Hans went out to play football. And Peter, he says, "I think I'm going to go to bed this evening." And little Gretchen, she was already making her way to the bed. After a while, Hans had waited until Gretchen went to bed. He went over to his little bank and he took out all the money in his bank, 1 penny. He ran to the toy maker's store. It was about ready to close. And he said, "Sir, what can I get for 1 penny?" And the store owner said, "The only thing I have for a penny is that big candy heart with a picture on it." "I'll take it," said Hans. Well, Peter had been out playing, and Hans went back home, and he stuck that candy heart in Gretchen's stocking that hung over the fireplace. And he went to bed. Peter came home from playing soccer with his friends, and when he did, he looked and he saw Gretchen's stocking had something in it. He felt it. He reached inside and he pulled out this big candy heart. He thought, "Oh, if I just take a little nibble off of it, Gretchen will never know." But he took 1 nibble, and then a second nibble. And before you know it, the entire candy heart was gone. "Oh no, I better go to town quick and get something for Gretchen to replace that candy heart that was in her stocking." And so Peter went to his bank and he got out all the money in his bank, 10 pennies. And he went to the store the toy maker, and he said, "Sir, I've got 10 pennies. How much does that little set of blue dishes cost?" He said, "Son, I will sell it to you because it's Christmas Eve for 10 pennies. And he took that little blue dishes back home and he stuck them in Gretchen's stocking. And the next morning, when Gretchen got up, she ran and she grabbed her stocking and she started pulling out those little blue dishes one by one. When she got to the bottom, it was empty. Hans couldn't figure out how that candy heart had turned into little blue dishes. But Gretchen said it was the best Christmas she ever had. That story comes from Germany, and it's called The Little Blue Dishes. This next story I want to share with you comes from this one is one of my favorite stories. This story comes from Mexico, and it's called A Piñata for Pepita. And Pepita was 5 years old, and she was just old enough for the first time to travel from Mexico, where her parents lived, up into the southwest part of Texas, where her grandmother lived, and she was going to spend Christmas with her grandmother. And when she got there, she rode on the train all by herself. Her grandmother met her at the station. Her grandmother took her home. Now, they lived in a little town called Willowville, and Willowville was a very friendly town. They were so friendly, they all got together at Christmas time, and they put up a big Christmas tree right in the middle of town. And then they would sing carols around the Christmas tree. And Pepita loved that. Now, Pepita, she wasn't an ordinary child, because Pepita, she could speak English that her mother had taught her, and she could also speak Spanish that her father had taught her. And so just a couple of days before Christmas, grandmother said, "Pepita, what do you want for Christmas?" Pepita said, "The only thing I really want is a piñata." "A piñata? What's a piñata?" She said, "Oh, it's a wonderful thing. It can be big, and it's filled with all kinds of wonderful things inside." And grandmother said, "It's always very, very big?" "No, sometimes it can be small too. But it has really good stuff. You can eat some of the stuff. It has toys. That's all I really want for Christmas is a piñata." Grandmother had never heard of a piñata before. She didn't know what it was. So she took Pepita to the schoolhouse. She said, "Surely the teacher will know what a piñata is." And the teacher, she said, "Pepita, tell me about this piñata that you want." And she told her all of the wonderful things that might be inside of it, how it could be big or it could be small. And the teacher said, "I don't know. I've never heard of one of those. Let's go to the librarian and see if the librarians know everything." And so they went to the library. And the librarian got out all kinds of books. And she showed her a book with a big pineapple in it. She said, "I bet that's what she wants. I bet she wants a pineapple." And she said, "Here, Pepita, is this what you want?" She said, "Well, it could look like that." "Is it filled with candy and toys?" "No," the librarian said, "I'm afraid I don't know what a piñata is either." So they sent her to the grocery store to look at a real pineapple. And when Pepita got there, she said, "Yeah, it could look like that. But does it have toys and candy inside?" The grocer said, "No, it doesn't." The whole town of Willowville, everyone wanted to know what a piñata was because they wanted Pepita to have a very happy Christmas. The day before Christmas came, still the whole town didn't know what a piñata was. And finally, the train came. Now, usually the train went right through the middle of town without stopping. But this day it stopped. No people got off. But the conductor got off with a big package that was addressed to Pepita at her grandmother's address. And so her grandmother was called, and they took the big box home. And when grandmother opened it, she saw this great big beautiful parrot. It was a clay pot, and it was all covered with beautiful bright feathers. And Pepita says, that's it, that's a piñata. What do you do with it? Said grandmother. And then grandmother noticed under the wing of the parrot was instructions. And so on Christmas Day, everyone came to see Pepita's piñata. And when they got there, grandmother had tied the parrot up to a rafter. And there was a long broomstick. And first, Pepita said, I want everyone else to try. And so the first one to try was the school teacher. They put a blindfold around her eyes. They gave her the broomstick. They spun her around, and she swung, and she almost hit the grocer right on the head. She took it off. She said, I'm afraid I'll hurt somebody. Next, the librarian tried. And she swung and spun herself all the way around and almost fell down. She missed the piñata too. Finally, it was the grocer's turn. And he took and wound up like he was swinging a baseball bat. And he swung it as hard as he could and totally missed the piñata. Finally, the children tried. No one could hit the piñata until finally Pepita's turn came. They put the blindfold on her. They spun her around. They gave her the stick. And Pepita looked at that piñata, or looked at the stick in her hand, and she swung as hard as she could, straight forward, and she hit the piñata. It burst open, and candy and cars and little trucks and little dolls fell out. One of the little dolls fell right in the top of grandmother's head. Everyone, the kids and the adults, all scrambled to pick up the toys and the candy. And that day, Pepita got her wish. She had the best Christmas that she ever had. And that is the story of Pepita wanted a piñata. And that story comes from Mexico. The last story I want to share with you is called A Cobweb Christmas. And this story is about an old woman who lived in a village a long time ago. You notice all these stories are from a long time ago? That was because it was before Santa Claus. And this story is called A Cobweb Christmas. Now, the old woman, she was poor. She was so poor that she never had enough money to buy food enough for her children, and they were always hungry. And she never had enough money to buy their clothes, and so they wore clothes that were worn out. She never had enough money to buy them shoes, and so they wore shoes with holes in them. It was Christmas Eve, and the old woman wanted her children to have Christmas. And so she said, children, as soon as you finish your chores, you go to bed. And the children did as they were told, thinking they would probably get nothing for Christmas. Well, the old woman, after the children were all asleep, she went out into the woods, and she looked in the pine forest. And she looked at a tree and, no, that's too big. No, that one's too small. Oh, that one's too scrawny. She looked and she looked until she found the perfect tree. She took her saw and she cut it down. She brought it back and she stood in the corner of her house. Now, she had cleaned all Christmas season waiting for Christmas. She had scrubbed the windows. She had swept the floors. She had even taken the broom and stood on a little footstool and cleaned off all of the cobwebs. She took and she stuck that tree in the corner of the room. And then she took some straw from her mattress and she wove some straw ornaments that she hung on the tree. That was going to be their Christmas. And the old woman went to bed exhausted, thinking, I wish I could have done more. Well, in the middle of the night, there was a little spider who had rode home all the way in that tree. And that spider, he started spinning the web that spiders spin. And it wasn't long before another spider came underneath the door. Now, you all like spiders, don't you? Some of these spiders were little bitty tiny. Some of them were great big spiders with long legs. There were hundreds of spiders that came in under the door. And they made their way to the tree. And they started spinning their webs all around the tree. And in the middle of the night, it got so cold in that old house that the frost came on those spider webs. And it turned them all silvery. And when the children and the old woman woke up the next morning, there was the Christmas tree with the straw ornaments. But it was all covered in these silvery spider webs. And ever since that day, many people have used angel hair to put over their trees to honor the spider, or they have put tinsel hanging from the trees. And that's the story of the spider's cobweb